Your father arranged our marriage," the Duke revealed. As the servant girl dropped the teapot before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now, let's start. London, 1815. The season had begun with its usual flurry of fans, feathers, and feverish speculation. The marriage mart was open for business, and as your devoted chronicler of all matters pertinent to the ton, I must confess this particular season promised delights of the most scandalous variety. Miss Sophia Merriweather, a lady of impeccable breeding but decidedly imperfect fortune, stood at the periphery of Lady Harrington's ballroom, her gloved fingers clutching her dance card with the desperate hope that anyone, might request her hand for a country reel. At 22, she was dangerously close to that dreaded designation of spinster, a fate worse than wearing last season's bonnet to a society gathering. "My dear Sophia," whispered her mother, Mrs. Penelope Merriweather, a woman whose ambitions for her daughter were inversely proportional to their dwindling finances. "Do stand up straighter. The Earl of Westmere is looking in this direction." But he was not. The Earl, like most eligible gentlemen of the ton, was gazing adoringly at Miss Amelia Fitzwilliam, this season's incomparable, whose dowry was rumoured to be substantial enough to repair 3 ancestral estates and still leave change for a new phaeton. What neither Sophia nor her mother knew, and what your faithful narrator takes particular delight in revealing to you, dear reader, was that fate had already selected a husband for our heroine. And he was not to be found among the preening peacocks of the ballroom that evening. No, the Duke of Ravenscroft, Nicholas Rothwell, was at that very moment riding through the rain-soaked countryside toward London, utterly unaware that his bachelor days were numbered. "I cannot believe I allowed Montague to convince me to attend this season," the Duke muttered to his valet as his carriage rumbled over the muddy roads. "Nothing but husband-hunters and their rapacious mammas." His valet, Thompson, having served his grace for 15 years, merely nodded. The Duke's aversion to marriage was legendary, matched only by his reputation as one of England's most eligible bachelors. With an ancient title, an even more ancient fortune, and, if I may be so bold, a face that had caused no fewer than 7 débutantes to swoon in his presence, Nicholas Rothwell was the prize of prizes. Yet he had avoided matrimony with the same dedication with which some gentlemen pursue it. At 30 years of age, he had mastered the art of the polite rejection, the strategic retreat, and when necessary, the hasty departure from London altogether. What the Duke did not realize, and here I must ask you to lean in closer, dear reader, for this is where our tale truly begins, was that his late father had made arrangements that would soon upend his carefully ordered existence. 3 days after Lady Harrington's ball, Sophia found herself summoned to her father's study. Mr. Merriweather, a gentleman whose scholarly pursuits had always taken precedence over financial ones, looked unusually serious. "Sophia, my dear," he began, clearing his throat nervously, "there is a matter of some importance we must discuss." Mrs. Merriweather, who had not been invited to this interview but had positioned herself firmly beside her husband's desk nonetheless, clasped her hands together in anticipation. "You recall my dear friend, the late Duke of Ravenscroft?" Mr. Merriweather continued. Sophia nodded. "The gentleman who died last winter? You corresponded with him about ancient Greek texts, I believe." "Indeed. We were at Oxford together, though he went on to far greater things than I." Mr. Merriweather's eyes took on a distant look. "Before his passing, we made an arrangement." Mrs. Merriweather gasped. "An arrangement?" "Yes, my dear. The Duke and I agreed that our children should marry." The teacup Sophia had been holding clattered back onto its saucer. "I beg your pardon, father. His son, Nicholas, the current Duke, is to be your husband. The late Duke and I signed the papers some years ago." Mrs. Merriweather nearly collapsed from joy, her hand fluttering to her chest. "A Duke! Our Sophia is to marry a Duke." Sophia, however, felt no such elation. "But father, this is absurd. We live in modern times. Arranged marriages they're positively medieval." "Not so uncommon among the nobility," her father corrected gently. "And the agreement comes with certain financial considerations that would benefit our family greatly." "You sold me?" Sophia stood, her cheeks flushing with indignation. Secured your future, Mrs. Merriweather corrected. And ours. Oh, my darling girl, just think, a duchess. Sophia thought instead of the rumors she had heard about the current Duke of Ravenscroft. A cold man. Arrogant. Some said he kept to his country estate because he found society beneath him. Others whispered of a broken heart that had turned him against the fairer sex altogether. Does the Duke know of this arrangement? Sophia asked, dreading the answer. Her father shifted uncomfortably. I believe his solicitor is informing him today. At that very moment, in a grand townhouse in Mayfair, the Duke of Ravenscroft was receiving the same news with considerably more vehemence. Absolutely not, Nicholas declared, pacing before the fireplace in his study. My father had no right. Mr. Wilkins, the family solicitor, a man who had weathered the tempers of 3 generations of Rothwells, remained unperturbed. The late Duke had every right, Your Grace. The contract is binding. Should you refuse to honor it, there would be significant financial penalties. I'll pay them. I'm afraid you cannot. Your father anticipated your reluctance. The penalty would involve the forfeiture of the Northumberland estate. Nicholas stopped pacing. The Northumberland estate had been in the Rothwell family for 6 generations. It was his favorite retreat, where he kept his prized horses and his most valuable library. This is preposterous. Who is this girl I'm supposedly to marry? Miss Sophia Merriweather. Her father is a scholar of some renown, though of modest means. I believe your father met him at Oxford. A fortune hunter, then. I wouldn't say so, Your Grace. The arrangement was initiated by your father, not Mr. Merriweather. And the dowry required of the Merriweathers is purely symbolic, the single gold sovereign. Nicholas frowned. His father had never shown interest in his marital prospects before. Why this bizarre posthumous matchmaking? There must be a way out of this. Mr. Wilkins coughed delicately. There is one provision. The contract stipulates that you must spend at least 1 month in each other's company before the wedding. Should either party find the other unsuitable after that period, the contract may be dissolved without penalty. Nicholas's expression darkened. And how am I to spend a month with a young woman without causing a scandal that would ruin us both? I took the liberty of arranging for the Merriweathers to be invited to Lady Harwick's country house party next week. It lasts a fortnight. After that, perhaps they might visit Ravenscroft Court. The Duke sighed, resigned. Very well. I shall endure this Miss Merriweather's company for a month, make it abundantly clear that I have no intention of marrying her, and then return to my peaceful existence. Oh, my dear reader, if only he knew what fate had in store. The Harwick estate was everything a country manor should be: sprawling gardens, a picturesque lake, and enough bedchambers to house half the ton without anyone having to acknowledge anyone else's existence before noon. Lady Harwick, a widow with 5 married daughters and an insatiable appetite for matchmaking, had been delighted to add the Merriweathers to her guest list. A duke, she had exclaimed to her companion. And one who has successfully avoided the parson's mousetrap for years. What a triumph it would be to see him caught at my house party. Sophia arrived with considerable trepidation. Her mother had commissioned 3 new gowns, straining their already precarious finances, and had spent the entire journey lecturing her on ducal protocol. Remember, you must always address him as Your Grace initially, then a duke after he gives you permission for familiarity. Never turn your back on him when leaving a room. And for heaven's sake, do not express any of your radical opinions about women's education. Sophia had nodded dutifully while silently resolving to be as disagreeable as possible. If the Duke found her unsuitable, they could both escape this ridiculous arrangement. The first evening, however, the Duke was nowhere to be seen. His Grace sends his regrets, Lady Harwick announced at dinner. He was detained by business matters and will join us tomorrow. Mrs. Merriweather's disappointment was palpable. Sophia's relief was equally so. The reprieve gave her time to explore the grounds, and early the next morning, she slipped out for a walk before breakfast. The gardens were magnificent, with late spring roses climbing trellises and formal hedges creating secluded nooks. It was in one such nook that Sophia encountered a tall gentleman examining a damaged rosebush. "Good morning," she called, assuming him to be a fellow guest. He turned, and Sophia was struck by the intensity of his gaze, deep blue eyes beneath dark brows, set in a face that was handsome in a severe, classical way. "Good morning," he replied, his voice deep and cultured. "You're an early riser." "The best time for walking," Sophia replied, "before the day becomes too structured with social obligations." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Not fond of social obligations, Miss Merriweather." "Sophia Merriweather." "And no, I find many of them rather tedious. All those conversations where no one says what they truly mean. A refreshing perspective. Most young ladies adore the social whirl." Sophia laughed. "Then I must not be the most young ladies." "And you, sir? You seem to be hiding in the garden rather than breakfasting with the company." "Nicholas," he offered, omitting his surname and title. "And yes, I suppose I am hiding, after a fashion. I'm here against my will, you see." "As am I," Sophia exclaimed. "My mother is determined that I make a good match this season, though I've told her repeatedly that I have no desire to marry a man who values me only for my family connections or my ability to organize his household." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "And what sort of man would you marry?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "One who sees me as a partner, not a possession. One who values intelligence and conversation over docility and accomplishments. One who wouldn't mind if I occasionally expressed an opinion on matters beyond the nursery and the menu. A rare creature indeed. Precisely why I expect to remain unmarried." "And you? Are you also being pushed toward matrimony?" A shadow crossed his face. "In a manner of speaking. There are expectations." They walked together through the gardens, their conversation flowing easily from books to politics to the merits of town versus country life. Sophia found herself charmed by his wit and the respectful way he listened to her opinions, even when he disagreed. "I should return before my absence is noted," Sophia said reluctantly as the breakfast hour approached. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Nicholas. Perhaps we'll encounter each other again during the house party." "I would like that very much, Miss Merriweather." She curtsied and turned to leave, unaware that the gentleman watching her go was the very Duke she was determined to reject. Nicholas watched her disappear around a hedge, a curious sensation in his chest. The girl was forthright, intelligent, and completely unaware of his identity. It had been refreshing to converse with someone who wasn't calculating his worth or batting her eyelashes at his title. Could this be the same Miss Merriweather his father had selected? It seemed too coincidental, yet the name was not common. His valet confirmed it when he returned to dress for breakfast. "Yes, Your Grace, Miss Sophia Merriweather is the young lady in question. Her parents arrived yesterday." Nicholas frowned at his reflection as Thompson adjusted his cravat. "She doesn't seem the type to agree to an arranged marriage." "Perhaps she is unaware of the arrangement," Thompson suggested. "Or perhaps, like yourself, she feels she has little choice in the matter." The Duke considered this. "I believe I'll maintain my anonymity a while longer. It's not often I get to converse with someone who isn't overawed by my title." Thompson's expression remained impassive, but there was a twinkle in his eye. "As you wish, Your Grace." For the next 3 days, Nicholas contrived to meet Sophia during her morning walks. To the rest of the house party, he presented himself as the Duke of Ravenscroft, formal and somewhat aloof. But in those early hours in the garden, he was simply Nicholas, a man who found himself increasingly captivated by a woman who challenged and intrigued him. Sophia, meanwhile, was experiencing a confusing dichotomy. Her encounters with the mysterious Nicholas were the highlight of her days, while her mandatory social interactions with the Duke of Ravenscroft were exercises in restraint. "He's so cold," she complained to her friend, Lady Julia Whitmore. "He barely acknowledges my presence, and when he does, he looks at me as if I were a specimen under glass." Lady Julia, who had known the Duke since childhood, seemed puzzled. "That's strange." Nicholas can be reserved, but he's never unkind. And he's been watching you quite intently when you're not looking. Has he? Perhaps he's trying to determine how quickly he can escape this arrangement. What arrangement? Sophia hesitated, then confided in her friend about the marriage contract. Lady Julia's eyes widened with each word. Oh, my dear. No wonder he's been so strange. Nicholas despises being managed. He probably thinks you're a willing participant in this scheme. I most certainly am not. I have no desire to marry a man who treats me like an unwelcome obligation. Lady Julia patted her hand sympathetically. Perhaps you should tell him that directly. Nicholas appreciates honesty above all else. But before Sophia could arrange a private conversation with the Duke, Lady Harwick announced a plan that would change everything. Tomorrow, she declared at dinner, we shall have a servants' masquerade. The announcement was met with confused murmurs from the guests. It's a delightful game, Lady Harwick explained. The gentlemen will dress as footmen, the ladies as maids, and my actual servants will be the nobility for the day. It creates such amusing situations. We'll hold it in the morning room, with tea and cakes. While some guests looked skeptical, others seemed entertained by the novelty. Sophia, recalling the Duke's obvious disdain for frivolity, glanced in his direction and was surprised to find him looking thoughtful rather than disapproving. The next morning, Sophia donned the simple black dress and white cap Lady Harwick had provided. She felt ridiculous but was determined to be a good sport. Her morning walk had been cancelled due to preparations for the masquerade, and she found herself missing her conversation with Nicholas. In the morning room, chaos reigned. Servants scurried about trying to balance teapots and platters, while the actual household staff, dressed in borrowed finery, sat regally on sofas issuing impossible demands. Footman. My tea requires more sugar. Maid. This cake is insufficiently layered. Sophia played her role with good humor, curtsying and addressing the butler as my lord when he demanded another slice of cake. The real entertainment, however, was watching the gentlemen of the ton attempting to perform tasks they had never before contemplated. Lord Pembroke spilled wine on Lady Harwick's favourite carpet. Sir Henry Blackwell dropped an entire platter of sandwiches. And the Duke of Ravenscroft. The Duke of Ravenscroft was nowhere to be seen. Until a familiar voice spoke behind her. Miss Merriweather, would you be so kind as to assist me with this teapot? I fear I'm making a mess of it. Sophia turned to find Nicholas, her Nicholas from the garden, dressed as a footman, holding a teapot with an expression of exaggerated helplessness. Nicholas! I didn't know you were among the guests. I've been looking for you this morning. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his severe features. I've been here all along, though perhaps not as I first presented myself. Something in his tone made Sophia pause. She looked more closely at him, the aristocratic bearing that even servant's livery couldn't disguise, the confident way he held himself despite the ridiculous costume. And then she knew. The teapot slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor with a sound that silenced the entire room. You're the Duke, she whispered, her face draining of colour. You're the Duke of Ravenscroft. Nicholas, the Duke, looked at the broken china, then back at her pale face. I am. And you are the woman my father selected as my bride. Your father arranged our marriage, Sophia said, her voice barely audible. And you've been deceiving me all this time. The room had gone utterly silent, all pretense of the masquerade forgotten as the ton watched this unexpected drama unfold. Not deceiving, Nicholas corrected gently. Getting to know you without the burden of titles and expectations. Mrs. Merriweather, who had been playing the role of a scullery maid with surprising enthusiasm, rushed forward. Your Grace! Please forgive my daughter's clumsiness. We shall replace the teapot immediately. The teapot is of no consequence, Mrs. Merriweather, the Duke replied, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. What matters is whether your daughter can forgive me for my deception. Sophia felt the eyes of the entire house party upon her. She had been made a fool of, and publicly so. Yet, had she? The man she had come to know in the garden was genuine, she was certain of it. His conversation, his ideas, his respect for her opinions, those couldn't have been feigned. "I need air," she said finally, turning and fleeing the room. She heard the collective gasp behind her as she committed the cardinal sin of turning her back on a duke, but she couldn't bring herself to care. In the garden where they had first met, Sophia paced furiously. How could she have been so blind? The fine clothes, even when dressed casually for morning walks. The commanding presence. The way the servants had seemed to materialize whenever he needed something. Sophia! She whirled to find the Duke standing at the entrance to the garden nook, still dressed in footman's livery, looking strangely vulnerable. "Your Grace," she replied stiffly. "Please, don't. I much preferred when you called me Nicholas." "You mean when I was ignorant of your true identity? When you were laughing at my naivety?" "I never laughed at you," he said quietly. "I cherished those moments when someone spoke to me as a man, not a title." Sophia crossed her arms. "Why maintain the charade? Why not tell me who you were? At first, I was curious about the woman my father had selected. I wanted to know you without the complication of our arrangement. And then..." He took a step closer. "And then I found myself looking forward to our walks more than I've looked forward to anything in years. You challenged me. You made me laugh. You didn't simper or agree with everything I said. And what of your coldness when we met formally? You barely acknowledged me at dinner." Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, a disarmingly human gesture for a duke. "I was afraid. Afraid that if I showed any interest in you publicly, you would think I was merely fulfilling my obligation. Afraid that the connection I felt with you in private wouldn't translate to our public personas. So you chose to be two different men. A mistake," he admitted. "But one born of genuine feeling, not malice." Sophia studied him, seeing beyond the Duke to the man she had come to know. "What happens now? Do we continue with this farce of getting to know each other for a month before rejecting the arrangement?" Nicholas took another step toward her. "Is that what you want? To reject the arrangement?" "What I want," Sophia said carefully, "is to marry a man who sees me as a partner, not a possession. One who values intelligence and conversation over docility and accomplishments. One who wouldn't mind if I occasionally expressed an opinion on matters beyond the nursery and the menu." A slow smile spread across the Duke's face as he recognized his own words. "And if such a man were standing before you now? I would say he has much to prove after his deception." "Challenge accepted, Miss Merriweather." Nicholas reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that sent a shiver through her despite her resolve to remain unmoved. "I propose we use this month to truly know each other, no deceptions, no titles, no obligations. Just Nicholas and Sophia. And at the end of the month. At the end of the month, we'll decide together whether your father and mine were wiser than we gave them credit for." The house party buzzed with speculation after what became known as the Teapot incident. Lady Harwick declared it the most successful servants' masquerade in history, though she did mourn the loss of her Sevres teapot. In the days that followed, the Tun was treated to the unprecedented sight of a duke openly courting a young woman of modest means. They rode together in the mornings, walked in the gardens, and engaged in spirited debates during evening gatherings. "Most irregular," whispered Lady Pembroke behind her fan. "A duke should maintain more dignity." "Most refreshing," countered Lady Whitmore. "Nicholas hasn't smiled this much since before his mother died." When the house party concluded, the Duke shocked society further by inviting the entire Merriweather family to Ravenscroft Court for a prolonged visit. "It's unheard of," Mrs. Merriweather fretted, even as she supervised the packing of their trunks. "People will talk." "People always talk," Sophia replied serenely. "And in this case, let them. I would rather face gossip than lose the chance to know if Nicholas and I could truly suit." Ravenscroft Court was magnificent, a sprawling stone mansion set among ancient oaks, with gardens that put Lady Harwick's to shame. But it was the library that captured Sophia's heart, 2 stories of books, with rolling ladders and comfortable window seats overlooking the parkland. I believe I've lost you to my books, Nicholas teased, finding her there on their third day. Sophia looked up from a rare edition of Mary Wollstonecraft's works that she'd discovered. Can you blame me? This collection is extraordinary. My father's passion, Nicholas said, sitting beside her. And now mine. Though I suspect he would approve of how thoroughly you're appreciating it. Do you think that's why he selected me? Because my father is a scholar. Nicholas considered this. Perhaps partly. But I've been reading his journals since we arrived. He wrote about meeting your family at a house party much like Lady Harwick's. He described you as a young woman of uncommon intelligence and spirit, utterly wasted on the frivolous pursuits society deems appropriate for her sex. Sophia laughed. That sounds like me. He also wrote that you reminded him of my mother, not in looks, but in character. She was his great love, you know. Their marriage was arranged as well, but they were desperately happy until her death. Is that why you've avoided marriage all these years? Because of your parents' love. Nicholas nodded slowly. How could I settle for less? Yet the Tun doesn't value love in marriage. It values connections, fortunes, heirs. Not all of us, Sophia said softly. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition, a possibility. The remaining weeks passed in a blur of shared confidences, laughter, and gradually deepening feelings. Nicholas showed Sophia his favorite places on the estate, the old oak where he'd built a treehouse as a boy, the hidden waterfall that only the local children knew about, the hilltop with views all the way to the sea on clear days. Sophia, in turn, shared her dreams of writing, of traveling, of creating a school for girls where they could learn more than accomplishments. You could do it, you know, Nicholas said as they rode back from the hilltop one evening. As a duchess, you would have the means and the influence. Are you proposing, Your Grace? Sophia teased, though her heart raced at the implication. Not yet, he replied with a smile that promised more. Our month isn't quite complete. On the final evening of the Merriweather stay, Nicholas arranged for a small dinner party. He invited only Lady Whitmore and her husband, along with Mr. Wilkins, the family solicitor. A strange guest list, Mrs. Merriweather observed as she helped Sophia dress in her finest gown, a deep blue silk that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Nicholas doesn't enjoy large gatherings, Sophia replied, having long since given up correcting her mother's familiarity with the Duke's name. And Lady Whitmore is a dear friend to us both. The dinner was elegant but relaxed, with conversation flowing easily among the small group. Mr. Merriweather and Lord Whitmore discovered a shared interest in ancient maps, while Lady Whitmore charmed Mrs. Merriweather with tales of her recent visit to Bath. After the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, Nicholas didn't linger long with the port but joined them promptly, taking a seat beside Sophia on a small settee. Mr. Wilkins has brought the contract, he said quietly. Our month ends tomorrow. We must decide. Sophia felt a flutter of anxiety. Despite their growing closeness, Nicholas had never explicitly stated his feelings. Had she misread his interest? Was he about to suggest they dissolve the arrangement after all? Before she could respond, the drawing-room door opened and Thompson entered, bearing a tea tray. Your tea, Your Grace, the valet announced. As he placed the tray before Sophia, Nicholas cleared his throat. Actually, Thompson, I believe Miss Merriweather would prefer to pour. Sophia raised an eyebrow at this break with protocol but reached for the teapot. As she lifted it, she noticed something glittering at the bottom of her cup. Confused, she tilted the pot to look more closely. Something wrong with the tea, my dear? Mrs. Merriweather inquired anxiously. There's something in my cup, Sophia replied, setting down the teapot to investigate. With delicate fingers, she extracted a ring, an exquisite diamond surrounded by sapphires, set in platinum. Oh, she gasped, looking up to find Nicholas watching her intently. I believe, he said softly, taking the ring from her trembling fingers, that this belongs on your hand, if you'll have it. Nicholas? He slid from the settee to one knee before her, holding the ring between them. Sophia Merriweather, our fathers may have arranged our meeting, but I choose you freely and with my whole heart. You challenge me, you inspire me, and you make me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The room held its collective breath. Mrs. Merriweather clutched at her chest. Mr. Wilkins fumbled for his handkerchief. Lady Whitmore smiled knowingly. Sophia looked into the eyes of the man she had come to love, first as Nicholas, then as the Duke, and finally as both together. "Yes," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." As Nicholas slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her hand, Sophia added with a mischievous smile, "Though I do hope you'll buy Lady Harwick a new teapot as a wedding gift." The Duke's laugh echoed through the drawing-room. "Anything for you, my love. Though I rather think we owe that teapot a debt of gratitude." "Indeed," Sophia agreed, leaning forward to whisper so only he could hear, "for revealing the truth, and my heart, all at once." Their wedding, held that autumn at Ravenscroft Court, was the social event of the year. The ton whispered behind their fans about the unusual match, but even the most skeptical observers could not deny the obvious affection between the Duke and his bride. "Love matches," sighed Lady Pembroke, watching the couple's first dance. "So unpredictable. Yet I must admit, they seem remarkably well suited." "Perhaps," suggested Lady Whitmore with a knowing smile, "there was wisdom in the arrangement after all." And so, dear reader, our tale concludes with a truth universally acknowledged, that sometimes, the heart recognizes what the mind is slow to accept. That beneath titles and expectations, genuine connection may flourish. And that occasionally, even the most reluctant participants in an arrangement may discover that fate, with the help of a broken teapot, knows best after all. The Duke and Duchess of Ravenscroft went on to establish one of the first proper schools for girls in England, to raise 3 children who combined their father's determination with their mother's spirit, and to demonstrate to society that true partnership in marriage was not only possible but preferable to the alternatives. And whenever anyone asked how they met, they would exchange a secret smile and simply say, "It was arranged, but the falling in love was entirely our own doing." Now, dear listener, do tell us where you're from and rate our story from 1 to 10. Until next time, this is your devoted chronicler of the ton, bidding you adieu.